kick off in a couple of minutes, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to use all the coin toss before. Do you want to do it? It's done. Okay, well, it being 7 p.m, we will begin. And ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Jewish Board of Deputies and our partner, the ECAJ, I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's 2025 Bradfield Election Forum and begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet. I'd also like to thank the board and Rabbi Lewin of North Shore Synagogue for so generously allowing us to host tonight's forum here in this beautiful shul. For those of you who don't know me, my name is David Ossip, and I'm President of the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies. Friends, in just under a fortnight, we will all be casting our ballots in an election which many in the Jewish community are calling the most important in our lifetime. Tonight's forum is therefore of particular importance, given that Bradfield is an electorate with a large and vibrant Jewish community, which is home to a number of key communal institutions. Before I introduce tonight's forum participants, and some of the other dignitaries present, I just want to set some ground rules or expectations for how tonight should run. I know how passionately everyone in this room, myself included, feels about this election. I know how visceral the emotions are, given what our Jewish community has experienced in recent times, given what the state of Israel has had to experience. But we want tonight's gathering to be as productive and informative as is possible. And that means I need everyone, no matter what your views may be of any individual candidate or their policy positions, to make sure that tonight's forum is held in the most dignified and courteous manner possible. The way in which this forum is conducted tonight reflects on our community as a whole, and anything you may think that you could gain through disruptive or offensive behaviour is not in the community's best interests. And I trust that everyone recognises this, and that tonight will be a wonderful reflection of the spirited and respectful debate which so characterises the Jewish tradition. With all of that in mind, I'd now like to welcome the Liberal candidate for the seat of Bradfield, Giselle Kaptarian, and the Independent candidate for Bradfield, Nicolette Boll. And to both of the candidates, I have to say that the quality of our democracy, the strength of our polity, is entirely dependent on high-caliber individuals putting their hands up to serve our society and our community and offering themselves up for public service. So thank you to both of you for doing that. Thank you for making, please. Thank you for making time to be at tonight's forum. I know today is the first day of pre-poll and it is an incredibly busy time, but we certainly do appreciate it. I also acknowledge the presence here tonight of the State Member for Wahroonga, I was going to say Ku-ring-gai, Alistair Henskins, the Shadow Attorney General. A magnificent and unrivalled supporter of our community. I note there are a couple of councillors here present If there is anyone else that I've inadvertently missed, please forgive me, it's not deliberate. Please note that tonight's debate will be recorded and will later be posted on both the board and the ECAJ social media channels, and that audience members who ask questions may be recorded tonight. I will now pass on to the moderator of tonight's debate, Simone Abel of the ECAJ, and I take this opportunity to wish both of the candidates all the best for tonight's forum, and to you, ladies and gentlemen, an informative and hopefully entertaining evening. Thank you.
Rabbi Lewin, David, Michelle, Aviva, Romy, Ruben, and of course Giselle and Nicolette, and our esteemed guests, thank you so much. I'd just like to echo all of David's thanks. What we will do shortly is we will throw a coin, and I'm just going to get one of you to call heads or tails, and that will determine the order of the questions. Just to say, it's really wonderful to be back in my home seat. It's special to be in the synagogue. This is where I grew up. This is where I had my bat mitzvah, and it's lovely to see all of you engaged here. And, thank you both for the time and the commitment that you've shown tonight. So, with that, I'm just going to let Nicolette, because you're right next to me, just call heads or tails, and we'll do that. Okay. Okay, and we've got heads, so I guess that will determine that you'll be answering questions first. So what we're going to do is we're going to move to an opening statement from both candidates. So I'll just call you up and we'll try and limit ourselves to 5 minutes each.
I think I'm going to use up 2 minutes to say hello to everybody. But thank you to Rabbi Lewin and also to David and Michelle and to the Member for Wahroonga councillors and other people gathered here today. Thank you just everybody for coming. A quick 2 minutes about me and then a little bit more about me in our community. I'm Nicolette Buller. I'm a mother of 2 raised right here and on the North Shore, and I'm still raising my kids. I worked in finance, climate and clean energy across business, government, management consulting, and think tanks. And after 35 years, I've kind of earned the belief that you don't have to trade off between social and environmental outcomes for really good business models and profits. Those 2 things can go hand in hand. And from a professional viewpoint, I've helped set up, energy efficiency for households across New South Wales at the Sustainable Energy Development Authority for about 5 years, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, where we see private sector investing alongside the government in terms of clean energy, and I love the efficiencies you can get when you have really tight and well-managed public-private partnerships. And also in responsible investing, where I've seen firsthand some of the innovative ways that we can get finance to do the heavy lifting on housing affordability for frontline workers and for our children. And if elected, I want to bring some of that experience, that deep, long work experience in the real world, as well as working around Parliament House as well, to get things done. So a bit about me personally. I am the daughter of 2 migrant parents. I'm not Jewish, but I did grow up here on the North Shore in Gordon and Killara and St Ives, principally schooled at Killara High School. And I have many neighbours and Jewish friends as well. And my mother's someone who cares very, very deeply about people and the environment, and she's been involved in refugee movements pretty much her whole life. And my father and my stepfather, actually work colleagues, work in medical devices. Some of the best types from Australia, pacemaker, ultrasound, bionic ear and so forth. I've learned from both my dads what business can do in terms of solving problems, and it's one of my special creative areas is the role of business in society. Many of my stepdad's business colleagues have been Jewish people. As I was reflecting on special meals, listening to very different types of music growing up, and also the fact that the Dutch, it can actually do the ch sound, like the chawad, like that's a thing. And so it hasn't always been easy to be the kid of migrant parents, different language, different customs, circles of friends, but it's always been good to be part of the mix of this extremely proud, multicultural nation that we call Australia. And I say nearly always because when I was, and if you heard me speak at the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies hosted an event at Masada in 2022. This story was not new to you, but when I was at Clara High School in about 1986, we had a new principal, Michael Gold, and there was a very, very first time that I have consciously experienced anti-Semitism right there on the North Shore in the mid-80s, where some children thought it would be a good idea to put hate symbols in spray can on the whole of the administration block. And at the time I was in the Student Representative Council, I just remember the shame that fell upon our school when that happened. And my Jewish friends, understandably, didn't turn up to school for a week, some of them 2 weeks, many of them enrolled in Masada, understandably. But in that moment, in the 1980s, here on the North Shore, indirectly I felt what it was like to feel unsafe to turn up to school. And here, particularly since October 7, there's horrific hate crimes, that this is still happening or happening again at even a bigger scale is all too real for our community. 2022, 23, 24, and still in 2025. And what I've been hearing, how am I going with time? What I've been hearing from mothers of preschoolers, what I've even been overhearing from teenagers outside Woolies at St Ives Village Shopping Centre, and it's what I'm hearing even attending this synagogue outside talking to people, is that obviously I'm telling you what you already know is why you're here as well, that your sense of safety and freedom has been impinged upon. You are an Australian and you feel unsafe to be here. Anti-Semitism is a scourge, and since my campaign's disgraceful social media post back in 2022, I've made efforts to educate myself, to listen and learn, and to start the work to model myself more in understanding anti-Semitism and a possible role to champion be a champion for our Jewish community and for the Australian community more broadly about anti-Semitism and how to stamp it out. It's not just about security, it's about respect. And as an independent, I don't have to agree with any party leaders. I'm free to make up my own mind, and I'm only answerable to our communities. And our Jewish community here in Bradfield is the second largest, of course, in New South Wales. It's diverse, it's a proud part of the character here. Everyone enjoys and should enjoy the contributions from our Jewish community. And if I have the privilege of being elected, I want to continue on these early steps that I've taken to build that understanding, the relationships and skill set, and use these with my moral conviction for standing up for communities that are threatened, that fight for the rights of people to self-determine, for our children and for all of us to attend schools, places of worship and cultural events free from hate, free from prejudice, free from anti-Semitism. In the 3 years between these two elections, I also ran in 2022, but I didn't close up shop. I've been very, very grateful and very honoured with the warm, welcoming arms people in the Jewish community have extended me to help me further understand and educate me. There are a few local rabbis here who have shared with me what it's like to be a leader in the community here. I've also met with representatives from the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies to learn more about the challenges facing Jewish peoples before and after October 7. Attended the briefing on anti-Semitism at Masada College last month. And of course, attended the Holocaust Museum a few times before it closed for renovation in these last few weeks. And especially a particularly very galvanising for a non-Jewish person was attending the October 7 commemoration in Vaucluse last year, where I got to see some of my neighbours and friends from different Jewish communities with very divergent views before October 7 turn up on that day, united, feeling what it's like to live across the other side of those horrors and those terrors and be united as a community who deserve and should expect better from all Australians. Now I'm on to a question. Okay. I hope I have the opportunity to say about some of the things that I'd like to do that I've heard from the Jewish community that they want from their MP, but maybe I can answer that in the questions that come. Yeah?
And we'll afford the same amount of time, so just if you...
wrap up? Okay. I wanted to do my pitch now, I suppose, which is that if I'm elected, I want to be the best representative possible for our communities. This one, the Jewish one, and because it's unfairly targeted, because anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem, it's an Australian problem. It's something, particularly as a non-Jewish person, that I know can help calling these things out when people see other non-Jewish people doing it. And I hope that this can resonate with non-Jewish people, because I want them to understand that this is a bigger problem than a Jewish problem. It's, as I mentioned, it's an Australian problem that we should all take very seriously. We know anti-Semitism is a scourge, and it is a moral responsibility of a member of Bradfield, whoever that is, to use that office to educate the Australian community of its present dangers. And my hope for Australia, and particularly here in Bradfield, is that we live in a community where we respect and celebrate each other, where we are free to go about our lives without fear and prejudice, and I'm committed to work tirelessly to make it so. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Giselle Kapterian. I'm your Liberal candidate for Bradfield, and can I first start by paying my particular thanks to Rabbi Lewin for hosting us here this evening, and to all of you for attending, but also to acknowledge Rabbi Shapiro's presence. I've seen Rabbi walk in. Thank you, Rabbi. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm running, because I do believe we are shaped by our stories. I'm a Willoughby girl. I grew up as part of the very large and somewhat well-known now Armenian Australian community here in Willoughby. I am the granddaughter of genocide survivors. My grandfather, my father's father, my father who's here this evening, he was 5 years old when he was marched across the Syrian desert, forced to move from his home because of his conviction, because of his faith. My parents were both born in Jerusalem, my father in the Christian quarter and my mother in the new side of Jerusalem. And they know what it is to grow up in the modern state of Israel, where many, including my family, were able to live in peace and lead a life where they could practice their own faith. My parents migrated here in the 1970s because of the promise of Australia. Australia was, as many in this audience will know, and continues to be for so many, the land of opportunity, of freedom, the land where you can shape your own destiny, the land where you work hard and contribute to your community. You get to have a go. You get to shape your own idea of happiness. And for many, unfortunately, as I'm hearing every single day across this electorate, that social contract between us and our government is under threat. This is a moment where the next generation of Australians are not as well off as the ones who've gone before. This is not only an economic problem that is so pervasive within our society, but as we know, when economic problems begin, social cohesion soon is under threat. And unfortunately, that is exactly what we have seen across our communities today. I have led my life making career choices based off the fact that I come from a people who know that whether you would like to engage with politics or not, politics finds you. So it is best to help shape the rules of the government that you are under before it shapes it without your input, and sometimes for the worse. For me, what we are experiencing in Australia right now is one of the greatest travesties and an indictment on where we have gotten to in terms of lack of leadership and vision and values cohesion in our society. I know, unfortunately, that the scourges that our communities have suffered begin when good people look away, begin when people take for granted the value system that we have been upholding as good citizens of Australia. I know in Yad Vashem it says on the walls, "Who after all remembers the Armenians?" Hitler's direct quote before executing his own solution to what he believed to be a problem in his vision for Germany. I know what it means to stand up for something you believe in, to hold tight to your community at a time when people feel very much under threat. But what we need more than ever is for advocates in our community to stand up and say, this is not the Australia that I signed up to. This is not the social contract that I am a party to. As a Liberal, I firmly believe in the right of every individual to fight for what it is that they believe is best for themselves, their family, and their community. And that can only be done when we all subscribe to the same vision for our country. And that vision can only be executed when government understands its role in our society and we ensure that government knows what that role actually is. The primary role of government in every liberal democracy is to keep its citizens safe. Safe from external threats and safe from internal threats. And there are a myriad of ways in which government needs to execute on that. Now, I'm looking forward to, over the course of this evening, to explore your questions and find out from you any pressing issues that I know are top of mind, that I'm hearing. I'm sure I can guess a few. But I do know that where economic challenges exist, social cohesion fractures. And that's what we're seeing right now. So my commitment to you is not only to uphold those, what John Howard calls the moral title deeds to Australia, that social contract about what it is we've signed up to, but make sure that we carry through with a vision for Australia that includes every single one of us to pursue our own idea of happiness. Thank you.
Very much, and thank you to our audience and also people at home who've been sending through questions. I'm going to try the best I can to group them thematically, and we won't get through all of them. There's many questions, but most of you have touched on very similar issues. Okay, so one of the first questions that you can imagine has come up a lot is, how you might deal with preferencing, particularly with respect to the Greens, and will you preference each other ahead of the Greens?
As an independent, I'm not preferencing anybody this campaign. It's asking you to put me first, and then you vote in the order of how you want the candidates elected. So no to the Greens in terms of any preferencing.
Is that on? Yes, great. Many will have already seen they've been at pre-poll today. On my pre-poll list, my recommendation is to put Greens last.
Thank you. Those were very clear answers. In my role as Head of Legal at the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, I've interviewed well over 100 university students who've been impacted by anti-Semitism on campus. If elected, would you support a judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism at Australian universities? Yeah, we can do that. That's fine, absolutely.
Absolutely, and the Liberal policy is exactly that. Peter Dutton has made clear that our commitment is, should the coalition win the election, that one of the first things we'll do is to begin that judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism on our universities, and I think not a moment too soon.
I I'm open to this idea. I've had sought some input, and it appears that from the judicial point of view, that having a parliamentary inquiry into this might be the most appropriate place. But since doing more reading and talking with people, I'm definitely very open to backing in a judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism on campuses, yes.
Thank you. And yeah, just for the purpose of our audience knowing, there's obviously been a Senate inquiry so far and also a parliamentary inquiry into anti-Semitism on campus, but both the Jewish Board of Deputies and the Executive Council of Australian Jewry have consistently campaigned for a judicial inquiry. If elected, would you support the establishment of a national task force to coordinate and mobilise all intelligence and law enforcement agencies in the fight against anti-Semitism, with an independent inspector reporting to the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security?
Yes, absolutely, because anti-Semitism is also dealt with in security and intelligence, and that would make absolute sense, and the report would go to the Joint Standing Committee and report it to the Parliament.
Yes.
Okay, great, very easy. How would both of you, if elected, respond to the kind of growing issue of foreign interference, both on university campuses and more broadly? You know, we've seen recently, obviously, the incident with the the naval boat incursion, and now we hear, that there's been a deal being done in Indonesia. What would you do? How would you respond to that?
Simone, I think it's a fantastic question because it goes to that primary responsibility that I spoke about in my opening remarks about what it is exactly that is the role of government in our society. And I think it's been very clear that the choice that people have at this coming election is a choice between a leader who understands this role as one of the primary responsibilities of government, who has one of the most impeccable backgrounds, actually, in the security space, versus somebody who, unfortunately, is either absent or uninformed on the issues that matter to Australian national security. And I think it goes to exactly this choice. Right now, as we look at that, at the decision that presents itself to us as Australians, it is really clear that we are facing a number of threats. And in an ever-changing geopolitical environment, we desperately need a leader who understands how to navigate these issues and who takes these issues with the seriousness that is required because of the consequences for Australia. So, all of those issues.
I think what Giselle's saying is that Labor has been very poor on this, and I would concur. The level of, we need more transparency in the decisions that are made on campuses, and foreign interference. We have a right to know about those things. So, yes, I agree.
Great, and I guess this next question sort of segues somewhat into that, but what is your position with respect to funding in the arts sector and also in the educational sector, and ensuring that that funding remains free of political prejudices, anti-Semitic hatred, etc.?
Yes, where do you start on that? There's a fine line between cultural freedoms and the benefit that cultural enterprises and expression bring to our community that we all value in terms of the censorship of things. But there is a very strong and clear line that promulgating hate, and particularly anti-Semitism, is absolutely not on. It needs to be called out, and funding should not go for those purposes. And not only not go, they should be also repealed if it's found out that what's happening is actually going in the opposite direction of what our communities need.
I agree. The challenge for, I think, any government is walking the line between freedom of speech and ensuring the safety and security of the people. What I think has unfortunately been the case is many instances where where some individuals have claimed freedom of speech as a shield, but rather actually used it as a sword. And that is the challenge that has presented itself to the current government, who I think has failed in navigating that dichotomy well enough. And what we need to be doing effectively, again, comes back to empowering our security agencies, empowering our investigative organisations to ensure that they understand where money is coming from. If you keep gutting and disempowering the organisations that were set up to make those inquiries, then we will not be as informed as we should be. And in this current era, we cannot afford to not be informed. It is absolutely an imperative for government to fulfil its duties in that respect. And that is what we've seen under the last 3 years of Labor, has been a gutting and disempowering of the security organisations that keep us safe, that track money and understand how influence is being exuded in this part of the world.
Thank you both. As you're probably aware, Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act currently requires communities like the Jewish community to defend itself, which of course we're doing in actions like the one that we currently have before the federal court against Wissam Haddad. However, the events of 9th of October on the Opera House steps have still led to no prosecutions. Do we need tougher laws to criminalise hate speech and the promotion of hatred?
Yes. So if we don't see a bending of that curve in incidences and severity, then yes, we need to flex every muscle possible to call out and stamp out anti-Semitism, definitely. I actually think perhaps having a definition that we can all get behind on what is anti-Semitism will go a very good step to helping capacitate the police force, intelligence and security, education institutions, funding and grant bodies, so that we can more clearly, concisely, confidently talk about it and manage it and call it out and prosecute against it.
I think the evidence is pretty clear on the ground. Right now we have entire segments of our community who feel unsafe. And it's very clear to me that the law is letting people down. So this is a matter of urgent reform that I know that the Liberal Party has turned their attention to as a matter of priority already.
I might just probe you both a little bit more on that because, you know, I think there's obviously been a tension between promoting free speech and then, of course, as you mentioned, Giselle, you know, trying to prevent hate speech from happening. But where we've seen resistance to, you know, racial vilification laws historically, I think has been, in fact, you know, on the Liberal side. So I just wanted to ask, obviously being, you know, Newitt, being Teals, and also the Liberal Party, you know, how would you practically navigate this 18C issue? We've obviously got the state laws as well, which have been reformed recently in New South Wales and Victoria. What would you do specifically, and how would you ensure that there's better coordination with law enforcement as well? Because the law, of course, is one thing, but then the enforcement of the law is another, as we've seen.
Yeah, well, you're the lawyer.
Not something I've practiced in myself, but I would say this, and I've got some people in the audience who know this even better, but one of the biggest challenges, if I might say, has not been so much the law enforcement side, but the carrying out of sentencing. And I think that that's been a big challenge for us. So we've got, where arrests have been made, the next challenge has been about ensuring that the right sentence has been attributed to that individual. Now, that is obviously primarily a state issue, of course, and we are federal candidates here. But clearly something more needs to be done, and that's why one of the reasons why the Liberal Party looked at mandatory sentencing, in order to send the signal quite clearly to the broader population about the type of behaviour that would be acceptable and what would not. And I know that has undergone a certain amount of controversy with, certain parts of the judiciary feeling that they have had that responsibility taken away from them. But at this point in where our community sits today, that something needed to be done. And so that was a position that was taken in order to be able to ensure that the outcomes being delivered keep our community safe and send the signal to the people who are perpetrating the wrong kinds of behaviour that it will not be tolerated.
And I think that deterrence, I think that deterrence is a key part of the whole, the education, the deterrence, and then the penalty, the consequences. I would probably say that we also, excuse me, I think it comes back also to that question around the definition and uniformity. I think it gives us a much stronger platform within talking about 18C as well, and again, acknowledging the different levels of where it gets managed. But there is a case that, again, if we can't turn that curve down around incidence and severity, that we need to proactively single this out for a period of time, because we can't let it get away from us any longer. I think our leaders all have a responsibility to call it out every time, and our Prime Minister has been far too slow and too lax in doing this, and we're paying the consequences, or the community, from that lack of timely leadership. And now we're having to turn that back, and that's why we're seeing so many different ways in the judiciary and parliamentary systems and other places where we have to pull out as many levers as possible to rein it back in.
Great, thank you. We've had a lot of questions about, how you would both navigate the climate crisis and, the differences in your positions on the environment. So I thought maybe I'd just let both of you outline where you stand on that.
Okay. Yes, the climate is a very important thing. I've worked in climate and clean energy for 35 years, and I very much see that there's some great opportunities for our nation to be part of the solution, both here. Sorry, it just feels really disingenuous to talk about the climate after anti-Semitism. Let me just take a breath. Okay. Switching. Yes, thank you. We do have a climate crisis, but I was going to say that we also have a great opportunity in Australia with all the wind and solar that we have to be a clean energy superpower. So there are some things that I agree with on the Liberal Party side around a gas reservation policy, because I think power bills intersect with climate crisis big time. We can and should have cheaper power bills, and we can have that if we don't pay the international price for gas. We can also have it if we do some of the things that the government wants around more renewable energy and batteries and more efficient appliances. So as an independent, I get to vote across the floor. I get to push whomever is in power further towards those things that I know can reduce power bills, can help climate. But there's a range of other things, if I may as well, around the intersection with nature, and the preservation of our natural environment is really, really key, not only to our species, but to other species as well. So biodiversity conservation, we've got 40 critically endangered species right here in Bradfield, from the Blue Gum High Forest to the Sydney turpentines, the powerful owl and various others. So these things are really important to protect, and they go hand in glove with helping also respond to the climate crisis by keeping good quality habitat in place, cool canopies for our suburbs as well. They're just some of the things.
I think the question about the direction we're heading has been put to rest on both sides of government. The Coalition have committed to net zero by 2050. The question is, how do we get there? And how do we get there in a way that allows everybody to keep the lights on, to keep businesses growing, to remain internationally competitive, and to keep Australia's sovereignty, economic sovereignty at the heart of that as well. Geopolitically, I've learnt this, in my time. I started life as an international humanitarian lawyer. I went to the Horn of Africa aged 23, and there I realised that until you have the economic conditions right in your country, everything else is moot. And so I became an international trade lawyer at that point, and I worked in London and Geneva at the World Trade Organization. I have learned, watching the experience of other countries, that unless you get those economic settings right, nobody listens to you at the international negotiating table. There's nothing to negotiate with. And worse, along the way, we might have a situation where people lose their jobs, their businesses close. Right now, 29,000 small businesses have gone out of business. They've shut shop. We have the fastest decline in living standards in the OECD. We have manufacturing companies who have been operating in Australia since 1856, who've had to shut their doors because of rising energy costs. As we look at trying to find our way in the world, in the new international supply chains where, our greatest trading partner is now being slapped with, a couple of 100% tariffs, how are we as Australians going to be able to meet our net zero targets and ensure that Australians continue to enjoy the standard of living that we work so hard for? And the Liberal Party has taken, the word agnostic in this place of worship seems out of place, but you'll forgive me for the application here. An agnostic approach to the energy supply. And that means relying on our renewables, relying on our strengths in renewable energy. We've committed to doubling our renewables, but ensuring that we also take advantage of all of the other wonderful resources we have in this country as well. And that includes gas, and you've seen our gas reservation policy, and a pathway to nuclear, because we are the only top 20 economy in the world that either doesn't currently use nuclear or have a plan for nuclear. I come from the technology industry. The last 6 years I've spent in tech, where Amazon, Google, Microsoft have all made significant investments in the nuclear space. And they've done so not only with traditional nuclear, but also with small modular nuclear reactors. Why? Because they have the same goals as us, a net zero target and being able to, keep meeting the energy supply that their products demand. So how are they going to do that? Did you know that a ChatGPT search takes about 10 times the amount of energy as a normal Google search? That to teach a new large language model, it takes the energy to power 120 homes for a year. That's the type of increasing energy demand that we're going to have if we want to be a relevant economy in the 21st century as the world is moving forward. And I think Australians deserve that. And so in order to secure that supply, to keep our ability to make things here and remain relevant, we need to have nuclear as part of that energy mix to secure our future.
Thank you both. And I think perhaps the interest in this kind of area of questioning is also a reflection of how disaffected the Jewish community feels by the actions of the Greens. And, for Jewish people that are concerned about the climate, they often feel that those concerns are not met. So I really appreciate you both answering that in such detail. Can I ask what your approach will be with regards to Jerusalem? Will you recognise West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel?
I understand right now that that Jerusalem has always been part of a peace plan. And I think best thing that Australia can do right now is to support the two-state solution and the pathway forward to creating that peace. And I think that point at that issue right now is very much in play as part of those peace talks. So I would like to make sure that we support a plan for peace.
And that's yes, the two-state solution has to happen. It can only happen, that answer can only happen in that process, and that process alone, with both parties at the table agreeing.
Thank you. And then keeping on foreign policy, no doubt you're both aware of the controversy around UNRWA funding and around UNRWA being implicated in the October 7th massacre by Hamas in southern Israel. Where would you, if elected, where would you sit on the question of funding of UNRWA or alternatives?
No. No funding for UNRWA. That's we need to make sure that aid goes to, in humanitarian ways, to where it's needed, but clearly that is not an organisation that is worthy of funding, and there are other ways that we can get our aid and humanitarian resources to those in need, and I understand both the major parties have identified some alternative bodies to do that, and I would support that.
Yeah. And I think I've already on the record saying no funding for UNRWA.
Thank you. And I suppose just probing in terms of practically, this is more for you, Nicolette, but, in the event that Labor doesn't have a clear majority at the election, what would you do in terms of, would you form or consider forming a government with Labor, and how would you navigate some of these points of difference?
I won't be doing any deals with any party, to be completely clear, in that hypothetical situation. I want to be accountable to our community first and foremost. And so if I have the opportunity to talk even just about confidence and supply, because if I have the privilege of being elected after confidence and supply, it's going to be on every bill on its merit every time, with input from the community and from experts before voting. But on confidence and supply, my main part about this is a stable parliament working in the national interest. Obviously, you've mentioned Labor, but let's have a look at where the numbers are and how they've fallen out across, because the Australian people will give us an idea about whether there's a mandate in there somewhere. And thirdly, I have published this 24-page policy booklet because I understand that you will know what Liberal stands for, and you'll know what Labor stands for, and the Greens, but knowing what an independent stand for is really difficult. So I've tried to make it as easy as possible by showing here that these are the responses that I would like as policies, if prosecuted, if I have that opportunity, at a time negotiating with Mr Dutton or Mr Albanese. These are the important things. So whichever, if the hypothetical happened and if Mr Albanese wanted my support, we would have to come very close to these, and I do have a section on anti-Semitism in my book as well. I've published that commitment to stamping it out, and so this is, I suppose, what you can look at to get some confidence about where I sit on these issues.
Thank you.
But I don't plan on forming government with anybody, just to be clear. I want to sit on the crossbench and be as free as possible to work and vote on the issues that matter to us as a community.
Thank you. And then bringing it back locally, what sort of funding guarantees will both of you be seeking from Parliament that will be directly relevant to the Bradfield electorate if you win this seat?
Well, I think a lot of you have already seen a number of my announcements here locally about the commitments I'm making to a lot of the local communities, sporting facilities. I'm actually working at the moment with Chabad House as well on a couple of matters as well, creating a safe space for young teenagers to come together, working with Masada on a couple of programs as well that they are looking at implementing for the Jewish students there. There are a number of areas, I think, that where greater commitment from a candidate or hopefully a member can make a big difference here, because I think one of the most wonderful things about Bradfield is how significant the community engagement is. And I think it is incumbent for on all levels of government to help support finding those facilities and supporting those facilities to allow for those different communities to come together. And you'll be seeing a few more announcements coming out from me over the next couple of days.
I applaud the the announcements, and I support everyone that you've actually announced, right through to the rugby club at Gordon. And I've also had conversations with community members about different funding that they want as well. I think what's really important is, though, that our local representatives don't just talk about funding a few days or a few weeks before an election. If these needs are in the community, they should be backed by your local member every week of the year, every year in that term. And my commitment is, if there is a funding need for our community, I will work on merit very hard and advocate with the grants programs that exist and other investment opportunities in our systems, state, federal and local, to my best ability. And that's my promise to you.
Thank you both. Several of the questions have focused on what seems to be an unprecedented level of campaigning in Bradfield this time around, and groups such as the Australian Conservation Foundation calling for volunteers. And what some of our audience have asked is whether or not you're aware of volunteers being paid for their work, and whether or not you have been working with particular groups to campaign in this area.
We have, I'll go first, will I? Sure. My campaign has just short of 1,300 volunteers. We have a very, very small number of very poorly paid staff this time around, or contractors working and helping out. But it is very much a grassroots community campaign. So I'm not aware of people paying other groups, not-for-profits. You mentioned one there who... you didn't turn up, were you there for Australian Conservation? I have spoken at, and Giselle also, at some of the Meet the Candidate forums from different groups. I couldn't speak on their behalf. I just don't know whether they're funded or not funded or paid or voluntary. But certainly in my campaign, lion's share, of course, is volunteers. I'm very grateful for our funding that we can buy in a small amount of expertise where we don't have it in our volunteer corps.
So certainly no payments to any third parties that I certainly have ever been aware of, certainly from my campaign. I'll speak on behalf of the Liberal Party. And then again, my volunteers are my volunteers, and I think I have 2 or maybe 3 paid staff. Yeah, so
Thank you both. We've come back to Israel-Palestine here, and whether or not, if you were elected, would you support a Palestinian state, and if so, with what conditions?
I'm happy to go. I think it's really clear the position of the party, and the position of my personal position is a 2-state solution is the way forward. The conditions of that, though, are a matter for Israel and the appropriate representatives of the Palestinian people to work that out themselves. And I think that is something that is a very delicate matter that I leave to those at the table to be able to sort through. But ideally, we would love to see an outcome. I personally would love to see an outcome that secures, I'm a firm believer in Israel's right to not only exist but defend itself, and also for the Palestinian people to live in peace and seek their own prosperity as well. I think that's very, very important for stability in the region and in the world.
I mean, that's ditto. The two-state solution has to happen with those. And, it's just, I don't know another peoples around the world who has to make a case for their statehood like the Jewish people do. And it's just time and time again you hear it and you think, it's just so inconsistent. There's such a double standard with so many other groups around the world who, but no, it's Israel that. And so, yes, so I completely concur with Giselle's point that this answer happens through the two-state solution.
Thank you. A lot of I guess, consistency there with that answer. Moving to immigration, there seems to have been record immigration over the last 2 years, and it would be great if you could both set out how you would respond to some of the challenges of immigration, including refugee intake. Obviously, that's an issue that's close to the hearts of the Jewish community historically, and also more recently, there's been concern about whether or not there's proper vetting procedures in place and proper resettlement programs for people who are immigrating to Australia, whether they're on humanitarian visas or other sorts of visas. So if you could perhaps just tell us a little bit more about your approaches on immigration, that'd be great.
I suppose there's 3 things to say about immigration. One is about how much and what type. The other one is around the humanitarian aspect, and then the third one's around security. On the first one, just to take it out of the box here, you're absolutely right, Simone. We do have a very unprecedented amount of immigration. It is somewhat of a correction post-COVID. I understand that both major parties have made some effort to curtail that, the coalition a little bit more strongly. And we kind of need to do that because we have a housing crisis, amongst other things. But we do need targeted immigration because when you go around Bradfield and you listen to people running aged care homes or wanting to hire people to build homes, we just don't have the people at almost full employment here to do that. So we need some targeted immigration, smartly done. On refugees, I just say I remain a very proud Australian in the big hearts that we have. And I mentioned my mum's work in refugees. I think we're taking in 32,000 refugees. It's not a number we should aim to do. We should try to be as full with our heart as possible from a humanitarian point of view to give people who are fleeing persecution and potential death in their home places refuge here in Australia if we can. And the third one is around security. This is something I need to get more informed on, but from my conversations that I've had, we do have some concerns about people coming into the country who don't necessarily have the same values, I suppose, as if we're such a thing as talking about Australian values very broadly. But let's just call out perhaps systematically demonstrated anti-Semitic behaviours or activities in their countries before they get here. So I do support the idea of having some way to have people go through a values test, if you like, or at least an education as a prerequisite for securing a visa. And certainly the screening process that exists, I've been assured that's existed under Labor and previously under the coalition government does those checks. But I'm not an expert on all the different types of visas, so I just don't know the practical application, but I'm absolutely open to the principle of improving our security and the security of people already in Australia by making sure that we don't import people who are systematically involved in anti-Semitism and organised hate.
I think that it is very clear, I think in this audience, we will have an audience who understands the value of migration, most definitely. Australia has been a multicultural success story to date, and I truly believe it, and I think that that is one of our greatest legacies. The problem has been how much And we have seen right now a stretching of our infrastructure and our services, an artificial propping up of our GDP through a migration program that Australia just can't, the numbers for which Australia just cannot yet absorb. And so the position that the Liberal Party, the coalition's put on the table is that we'll take 20% off current migration levels to be able to allow the infrastructure to catch up, to ensure that Australians who are here today, and soon to be Australians, can have the same opportunities that Australians already here have. We want to make sure that those living standards are maintained for all individuals who then choose to call Australia home. The challenge, in addition, has been, of course, making sure that our migration system is fit for purpose and appropriately applied. One of the greatest issues we have seen under this current Labor government has been the inappropriate application of the wrong type of visa in circumstances that just don't suit it. For example, the application of holidaymaker visas instead of a more serious review of individuals coming from Gaza. Now, and any other circumstance, as has been the case in Australia, is that if somebody is coming from a terrorist-controlled territory, then the appropriate security controls and checks and balances must be applied. The checks must be applied. We have seen instead a complete misapplication of Australia's generous migration system and a flaunting of that system, which goodness knows how that will manifest, but I certainly hope that is rectified soon enough. And I know that the coalition's called that out on a number of occasions. The other thing is, we have a situation where we need to make sure that we keep our migration system healthy, so that we are attracting the right people into this country, the right skills, the people who want to call Australia home, who are proud to call Australia home, coming to this country in a way that shares the values and the vision for our nation that we hold dear. So I think that there's a few things that unfortunately the ball has been dropped by the current Albanese government that we need to rectify sooner rather than later.
Thank you. That's very helpful. As you're probably aware, the Executive Council of Australian Jewry has published a 15-point plan of action, and one of the areas, of course, is education. I think we're all interested to know what you would do to ensure that anti-Semitism education forms part of the national curriculum as distinct from just Holocaust education. And I think, the events of post-October 7th have demonstrated perhaps that there is a failure or a gap in our education in this area, and of course not just specific to the Jewish community, that has wider ramifications for social cohesion. So if you're both willing to address that.
Sure. I think this is a really important part of that social cohesion piece that we've been talking about. Again, I hark back to my own history as it's a lesson learned. If, the genocide of my people continues to be overlooked by a number of countries who would otherwise call themselves, defenders of human rights, and that's a real travesty. The travesty continues to exist because the type of behaviour that condones continues to be perpetrated. And that's why it is so important that we acknowledge and we learn from the histories of the past, from the lessons of the past. It is so important that the next generation of Australians understand how hatred is formed and how quickly it becomes more than just words. And that is... I'm surprised that in this day and age we are having this discussion in Australia. I'm disappointed beyond words that we're having this discussion in Australia. It surprises me the number of young people who have not had the exposure to the experience of past events, but they can understand the severity of the situation that is presented to us. The sooner we rectify that, I think the better we will all be, and it will, I am sure of it, lead to better outcomes in the future, because only when we understand the lessons of the past can we be better ourselves.
That's exactly right. That global revulsion of the Holocaust should have been the end. I mean, that shouldn't have happened, but it continues. It has not been put into the history bin. And education, and I mentioned the story before about my experience at Clara High School, and as someone working in the Student Representative Council, I wasn't even aware. I was aware of the Holocaust, but I had no other education at all about what was happening. And I knew about the Holocaust because I'd taken HISI subjects. You know, I was interested in social issues and geography and history. It needs to win, and it's broader. I mean, I completely agree. Thank you. It was very beautifully said, Giselle. It's, and actually, the plan, thank you to these organisations who've done the heavy lifting on the thinking behind this. It's a hard yes to all of those things, because I think it's a complement. It's a complementary thing. It's the curriculum. It's the definition I talked about before for anti-Semitism. It's the police force being trained to identify it and enforce it. And even when you have institutions that mirror back those behaviours, not just through the schools, but it's a reinforcing thing. And as I mentioned before, all of our leaders politically as well need to have this discipline of calling it out and stopping it in its tracks. So it's a hard yes on all of the parts of the education. Really important. We've got a common language that we can all share to talk about and manage this.
Thank you both. That's really great to hear from both of you on that. I think probably this will be the final question from me, but then you'll have time for a closing address, of course. As we know, children in Australia these days are consuming more online propaganda through social media platforms, you know, somewhere I think in the vicinity of 5 hours a day, than children, ironically, in Iran or China, where some of these platforms are banned. We've seen post-October 7th, you know, how the online space has become a real battleground, and it's been used to cultivate anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic discourse. What would you both do, if elected, to combat online hatred, not just towards the Jewish community, but also, of course, towards other groups?
It's my turn, but I feel like you want to go first. I don't have a good answer to this, except I am 100% behind getting it done, mainly because coming out of finance, when the hate crimes in Christchurch, for example, happened before Mark Zuckerberg, like, we actually had the opportunity to make sure that things like live streaming of hate crimes didn't happen by using the institutional institutional funds to put pressure on groups like Meta, which was then Facebook. That's kind of gone. The size and might of these private platforms that often run agendas which are not, unfortunately, as we all know, the clickbait is, if it's more sensational, it gets pushed up. So we get hate, we get awful stuff that we consume, our kids consume, and divides society. I don't have a solution to that, but that is one of the single most important conversations to get going at pace, because that is the next generation. I mean, it's across every generation, but that younger generation, by and large, gets its information that it sometimes thinks is news when it's not, it's propaganda. And it is so important in the absence of critical thinking. We have, and the education and the curriculum about these things, we have to help. We have to find a way of better regulating it.
That's great. This is an area I'm actually particularly passionate about. You know, with my background in tech, But I'll take it a step back, and I think it comes back to this issue about algorithms and echo chambers. And I think that's part of the biggest problem we've got today, where we are seeing a further division of society because of this rabbit hole we tend to go into. So, you know, our children have smartphones from a very early age, and those algorithms quickly pick up on what people are talking about, and then they start perpetuating a certain worldview. And they keep presenting that worldview without any challenge to that. Now, Australia is very well known for its critical thinking skills. I think we are brilliant at it. Well, we have been to date. But I do think there is a time upon us right now that we have to make sure that we don't take that for granted, but rather teach it in our schools and also at home, because it is hugely important in the world of generative AI, in the world of algorithms, that we start understanding the need to question information. In the world of ChatGPT in particular, or you know, any what's it called, generative AI, is that you know, up until now, if you put a search into Google, Google search, and I'm using Google because it's the most well-used search engine across the world. You put a search term in, and you get presented with 250,000 different types of answers. And you, as a discerning individual, gets to have a look through all of those answers, and you come up with what you believe to be your best understanding of the question that you put to Google. But in the world of generative AI, you present a question, and an answer is given to you like it is the single truth. And that is a problem. It is a problem in a world where other people control the information that was trolled to create that source of truth. That those other people could be other governments, other companies, other agendas are certainly at play, or even just a simple limitation on the type of information it draws upon to present that answer to you. Now, in that world, there's a lot of threats that are presented where that single answer is presented to you as the truth, particularly when we don't have control over that information. I think that, unfortunately, the speed of technology at this point in time, the evolution of technology is so great, and we've seen the speed of government to regulate in this space. There is certainly a mismatch, and we need people in government who understand this space to be able to draw the right line between keeping people safe, understanding that information and truth are not the same thing, and ensuring that we keep enough room there for people to keep innovating and for new technologies to emerge. That's a very hard line to walk. But in it, I also make reference to the fact that it was the Liberal Party who brought those major technology juggernauts to the table. A few years ago, you'll remember, it was Paul Fletcher, actually, the member for Bradfield, who called their bluff on the issue about information, news sharing on platforms, and they blinked. He brought them to the table on that matter. So this is the side of government that's not afraid to stand up to the big tech companies and make sure that information sharing remains open to everybody, transparent, and is willing to take the next step to ensure that our regulatory environment meets the needs of the time. And that includes that ever-changing, very fast pace of the tech world, including generative AI.
Thank you both. It's been a privilege to hear from both of you, and I think everyone here will agree that the civil and respectful nature of this discussion, I think, has been really commendable, and I'd also really like to thank all of you for the respect and decorum that you've shown our candidates here. I'm now going to invite both of them to do a closing address. We'll limit it to 4 minutes. This time what I'll do is a very clear kind of time at the 3-minute mark, if that's okay. Try not to be put off by me, and then after that we'll try and keep it time limited, because I know you have to go and so do others. So with that, I think we'll invite Nicolette to come. You're going to do a swap? All right. Okay, that's very fair, and okay, no problem. Thank you.
4 minutes, okay. I don't need to tell you that anti-Semitism is a scourge in our society, and it's an issue for all Australians, not just Jewish Australians. And the recent spike in anti-Semitism has left many Jewish Australians, particularly here in our communities in Bradfield, feeling very unsafe and very traumatised. Many of us are affected, and people have told me that they genuinely feel frightened. This is a moment for strong moral leadership and a united community-focused response. I don't think we have seen what we've expected to see from the leadership in our country so far on some sides of Parliament. Instead, sometimes we've seen anti-Semitism being turned into a political football, which has been damaging to the Jewish community and for our entire national cohesion. Instead, I want to see a Parliament and a society where people are safe and welcomed, and I want a place where we have warm support shown by neighbours and friends across communities. This is the opportunity that we have to take to turn this around, and my commitment and my approach to try and be the best representative if I have the privilege of being elected on May the 3rd rests in 3 key pillars: law reform, education, and political leadership. We need stronger laws, as we've discussed tonight, on national coordination to deter and punish anti-Semitism, and we need better education in schools, in universities, and workplaces and beyond. We need to build that understanding and stamp out the hatred at its roots. We need consistent and courageous leadership from all sides of Parliament and all quarters of society. We need to call out anti-Semitism when it appears and stop it being normalised. I fully support the key points in the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies and the Executive Council of Australian Jewry that they have proposed in their goals, and largely, and I'm open to discussion, I largely support and align those recommendations, reflecting a resolve to protect Jewish communities and uphold social cohesion for all. How am I going? Okay. And then finally, my commitment and stance include, for example, things like establishing National Anti-Semitism Task Force, harmonising hate crimes to strengthen education, policing and community initiatives. And I will show strong moral leadership and work with all communities to combat anti-Semitism and hatred in any form. And that is my commitment to you as an independent. I can work on climate change without the help of the Greens, but I can also work for you, the communities here in Bradfield, for what you deserve, which is to live free from the fear of turning up to schools and worshipping, and to be honoured and valued for your contribution to our most wonderful multicultural nation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just take this opportunity to just note that for me, the challenges that we are facing, that we've spoken about this evening, are not just an esoteric academic exercise. They're a very personal fight for me. This is not about something that I know is, to be transient, that can be treated lightly. This is what decides the destiny of a people. It decides the destiny of a country. And we talk as politicians a lot about important elections, but this one is so important for so many of us. It is so important because it is the choice about the direction that Australia is going to take as a nation, about who we are going to be and how we are going to support that. And so I leave you with one ask. As you speak to your friends and family, I ask you to define what it is that you want to see in your representatives, the type of fight you want to see in the people who represent you in Canberra, the type of Australia you want to see reflected in their actions. because I know that the Australia that my parents chose to move to in the 1970s still exists, but it needs our support. It needs every single one of us to do our bit to make sure that we're holding the right people to account, to define exactly what it is that we want to see, and make sure that moving forward, we all stand up, each and every single one of us, for the type of Australian and Australians we want to be. My personal commitment to you is that I will fight for all of those things because I know the consequences when we don't. So thank you.
Thank you both. It was fantastic to hear from both of you, and we really appreciate you making the time. I'm now going to invite Rabbi Lewin to give a vote of thanks and closing statement.
Thank you very much, Simon, and welcome everybody. In this week's parasha, I just had to take that on. There was just too big a crowd for a regular Friday night to. But really, on behalf of the Board of North Shore Synagogue, thank you all for joining us. To Nicolette and Giselle, thank you for your presentations, for your thoughts, and also thank you for the way that you conducted the conversation with each other. One of the great tragedies of politics is that when one side has a good point, the other immediately attacks it, instead of saying, wow, that's really good, I can get behind that. And really, we got a sense that there's a lot in common between both of you, which obviously makes the choice a bit more difficult for us. This opportunity that we have to be able to go to an election to vote for two, well, I'm going to say two candidates because the others didn't pitch, is one of the blessings that we have to live here. And I thank the ECAJ, I thank the Board of Deputies, David, Michelle, Simone, and all those who've made their time to come tonight. I know the weather tried its best, but couldn't keep us away. And please make your voice and count for May 3rd, because it is that important election for each and every one of us. But can I add one more thing? On Friday is Anzac Day. And those brave men and women fought for the right for each and every one of us to be able to vote. So I urge you, as members of Bradfield, to make efforts to attend one of the multiple Anzac Day events on Friday, because we love this country, we cherish Australia, and let us stand up together, because together we march forward to a brighter and better future. We have seen the danger of taking Australia for granted. We cannot let that happen. So I wish you both all the best for Saturday, and may the best representative win. And we know that whoever wins, Bradfield will be in good hands. Thank you. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.